Well, Crispin, I'm delighted to be able to welcome you back to the European Parliament today. Our Legal Affairs Committee has been working quite extensively on all of the issues that interest you in particular. Certainly on the matters of transfer of value, it's important, absolutely vital we get this right, because there's just so much at stake for people involved in the industry, for creators, for the music business, and much wider than that, that we make sure we get this issue right.
I'm extremely grateful to you for doing all this work and for understanding that this really is completely critical to the future of European creativity generally. Specifically, I mean, to music, obviously, it's very important, but it's also fantastically important to journalists, poets, playwrights, photographers, artists, authors, all creators. The proposals put forward by the Parliament were incredibly welcome, and they will resolve the major problem. If I can give you a kind of real life example of what the transfer of value means specifically to me, in my last PRS statement, which is a royalty statement that I get from my collecting society, for the same song, which had 1 million streams on Spotify, and I got £120 for the 1 million streams on Spotify. And then exactly the same song had 1 million views on YouTube, and I got £12 for the 1 million views on YouTube. Now, the situation is that there is no such thing as exposure anymore. I don't believe personally that CDs will be around for very much longer, because I certainly don't listen to them. None of my friends listen to them. It's a shrinking market. Same with digital downloads. Effectively, radio has become the primary method of delivering music and of consuming music. So whereas before the radio would be seen as exposure and promotion to sell a record or a live concert, that there is nothing but the format, the stream. So when YouTube says we are providing exposure or promotion for you to sell your product, there is no product to sell. The product is the view on YouTube. And they say there is a live issue. They say we can go out and earn money live. But the reality, I've been there. I used to be an artist. I now work with emerging artists, Jake Bug, Florence and the Machine, Bat for Lashes, the entire time. You need to have 1,500 people in the audience to make a modest living for 4 or 5 people in a band. And it takes a long time to get 1,500 people in the audience. And the trouble is that I have bands, or I've worked with bands that have had 30, 40 million views on YouTube, but 30 or 40 million views on YouTube translates to 15 or 16 people in Norwich. So it doesn't, you know, the audience.
I'm surprised by
the audiences aren't, the reality of the audiences aren't.
One of the biggest challenges that we have is trying to, in effect, future-proof whatever provisions we put in place.
Yeah.
Because the industry is changing so quickly, the technology is changing so quickly, the way in which people are accessing the creative industries is changing rapidly all the time. And for a long time we were in a position where the basic legal delivery of creative content remained within certain parameters. Even though the technologies did move on and eventually we had CDs. I mean, that was quite revolutionary at the time. I'm from that generation. But now we really are in an era that whenever we think through a format that's going to work for today, we get that right. By the time we've got it right, things have moved on already.
But I get exactly what you're saying, but I do think that the proposals that you've put forward are effective and are future-proof.
Yes.
I mean, the idea that the redefining, it's a anachronistic piece of legislation that provided safe harbour for platforms that are doing things that safe harbour was never intended for them to do. Safe harbour was invented, as you know, to protect the pipelines down which the internet travelled, so that you couldn't sue the postman for delivering something that was illegal. However, these platforms and the definitions that you've invented will work and will work in the future between an active and a passive host. So if it is just British Telecom who runs a pipeline across the Atlantic, you can't sue them for somebody sending something illegal down there. However, where it's an enormous social media platform that actively promotes, if you, for example, on YouTube, if you play one piece of music, it will then continue to play other pieces of music that it chooses based upon your previous choices. So it will play you music that you like. That YouTube is the biggest and best streaming service on the planet. It just needs to admit that it is one.
Yeah, well, there is a real issue of responsibility there as well. I quite recently actually made a trip across to the States in order to try and get some further information about how the platforms are operating and what's going on. And that was a really interesting experience for me, and a lot of the information I got from that has allowed us to do what we've done here. But you know, people have got to start to understand, and part of the exercise that we have to do is an educational exercise along with the provisions that we're putting in place. People have got to understand this. This is not just about a really cool Crispin talking to a really boring MEP called Karim. This is about future generations and content. This is about making sure that we are not about to eliminate all of that talent from being able to do the future innovation and creativity. And at the end of the day, the public has to understand one thing. They love their content. Where does it come from?
You're absolutely right. And also, the trouble is that the narrative has recently been kind of deliberately misconstrued as if copyright and creator rights are an industrial battle. It's not an industrial battle. Copyright is an individual right. And in order to protect, people are becoming, the citizen creator. People are producing incredible pieces of work and uploading them to platforms, and sooner or later those people might want to become professional creators rather than citizen creators. So the provisions in this protect those people from the future. And for example, I understand that Creative Commons have been having some issues with, and I'm a big supporter of Creative Commons. However, there is allegedly, so the meme on the internet goes, that the person who invented, not meaning to advertise, but the person who invented the iOS system behind the iPhone was a hacker from somewhere like Sweden, who put up his idea on Creative Commons, and Apple have built an enormous global industry based on the back of his work. He should have a right to a slice of that, and this is what the commission's proposals. These are the proposals suggest that you will give him the opportunity to do that. So these proposals are protecting the citizen, and they're protecting the citizen creator from to allow them to continue to be creative in the future. Yes. And that in turn will, from a European perspective, creativity and our national cultural output defines our cultural identity. It's the difference between all of us. Sure, I know that you're a fan of Europe, I'm a huge fan of Europe, but we need to protect our individual identities and our languages, and it's culture that does that. And if we homogenize all of our culture for the sake of but it's the wrong way to describe it, but a kind of Californian version of what culture should be, then we really risk damaging the future for our children and our children's children and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and one of the things that I want to do, we've got a unique opportunity here at a European level to actually, what we put in place today is going to become the standard setter and in effect put in place the route plan for the rest of the world to follow. So we are constructing, in effect, the ecosystem for the industry. So we've got to get it right. We've got to make sure that it has the ability to keep evolving. We cannot be too prescriptive in what we do, but at the same time, we've got to build in the necessary protections as well. We've got to get that right. Now, one of the things that the United Kingdom has, played a real role in leading in making sure that at a European level we get all of the right infrastructure in place, all of the right provisions in place, all of the right legislation in place, get the ecosystem designed up properly to run in a proper way, get the legal protections in place, whilst at the same time finding and thinking of new ways to allow new artists to flourish and for their creative content not only to be protected but promoted as well at the same time. We cannot become too prescriptive in any way at all. And you're quite right to make the point about Europe. The United Kingdom played a leading role in helping deliver all of this, and that was a sort of pragmatism that we always brought to the European table. I think it's going to be missed.
I totally agree with you, and I can confirm. I mean, we delivered today a petition of nearly 20,000 names from creators from all over Europe that wanted to support the work that you've been doing in order to make sure that there is a sustainable future for creativity. Creativity has a great value. It's more valuable to the UK than the car industry or the fashion industry.
Yeah. And as those that played a huge role in constructing the single market, the next natural development of that is a digital single market.
Yes.
And we've got to find some way of remaining engaged in that.
My American colleagues, I'm in contact with a lot of American friends. I work with a lot of American artists, and they are all crossing their fingers and praying that the EU does the right thing here, because if we are leading the way, Europe is leading the way here, these decisions will affect a generation profoundly. Sure. Yeah. And they will have much bigger reverberations than just this. I understand that it's become, it's only really a copyright issue, but I understand that it's actually been extremely contentious as a piece of legislation going through. But what I wanted to kind of to say is that there is some argument that this is actually it's a competition issue from a kind of business perspective, that the tech giants understand that any oligopoly or monopoly can be taken to pieces by regulation, but instead they also understand that an ideology can only be defeated by another ideology. So they kind of hide their commercial self-interests behind, masquerading behind an idea of freedom of information and freedom of speech. But what they don't recognize and what they don't enunciate, which we as creators do recognize and try and push, is that actually freedom of speech and lack of censorship has been about creative content more than it's been about anything. It's been poets that have been censored, it's been authors and music that has been censored throughout history. And in effect, what's happening here is in a sense censoring creativity. But the creators that I know are feel that the opportunity that you are pushing through and that Jory is making a decision on now, we are, all of our eggs are in your basket. So I hope that you can persuade your colleagues that this is, it's a responsibility that will be a kind of once in a lifetime opportunity for you to do the right thing, and it won't. In a sense, there's a lot of word about how the internet, it will break the internet. I think in many respects, looking at how there is revenge porn, ISIS, 4chan, the internet is already broken. What these rules will do is reaffirm democracy, and it'll mend the internet rather than breaking it, I think.
I completely understand that this is a critical situation for creators. I get it. Very pleased to see that, certainly from your side, there is an understanding of the incredible complexities that we've had to work through here.
Certainly.
I'm pleased to see that we seem to be arriving at a destination that the industry itself believes can be made to work. But you make a really interesting point on transparency issues. On the one hand, from the platforms, I hear all of the arguments that you've just made about freedom of expression, freedom of speech, etc., etc. But at the same time, when it comes to declarations of quite what artists who are using their platforms can expect to be remunerated by,
Yes.
that is top secret.
There's absolutely...
That cannot be disclosed.
Yeah.
So there is a real mismatch between what they are saying and doing on the one hand and what they are dictating and doing on the other.
I couldn't agree with you more. There's a massive contradiction in the messaging coming out from, that on the one hand, YouTube will be lobbying, or YouTube are lobbying, saying, look, don't blame us, we're just the postman. But at the same time, the musical ambassador for YouTube, Lyle Cohen, is openly boasting how 80% of the music on YouTube is recommended by YouTube. It's one or the other.
Sure.
And these mixed messages are, they're creating a chaos. And unfortunately, whereas I love technology, don't get me wrong, I love YouTube. I just think it's a streaming service, and it's the best one. It should pay like a streaming service. It shouldn't pretend that it's not. It may be streaming works, content that users have generated, but that's still content that creators have made. Those are citizen creators creating something, and sooner or later they may want to become professional filmmakers or professional artists. I'm repeating myself, but it's this is the future of our culture.
It's in the platform's own interests to ensure that the creators are being properly and fairly rewarded, because the platforms are only as successful as the content that is placed upon them.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
They in effect are shooting themselves in the foot by dealing with things in the way that they presently are, certainly when it comes to the newer artists who want to use their platforms.
Yes, I agree, but I also, it could be argued, and it looks the way that that a lot of those platforms that are now producing their own professional content, that there is a kind of land grab into that Netflix are making their own television programs. They're brilliant television programs. I've got no problem with that, and people pay for it. That's absolutely great. But YouTube are now starting to make their own special feature programs, and making the artists that they make the special feature programs about sign non-disclosure agreements about how to, there's just a lot of double dealing going on, and I think your point about transparency is that they need to be transparent about what their motives are. And they need to stop masquerading as freedom fighters and admit to being very successful global companies.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure, Crispin, you and I will be discussing this quite a lot in time to come. I've no doubt about that. I'm actually today very confident that we're going to arrive at a position that works. I think there is an understanding within our committee here in the European Parliament, certainly, as to what is required and how best to ensure that it's delivered. Certainly for my part, please rest assured I will continue to push to ensure that we get the final product right.
I'm really grateful to you, Sajjad. It's incredibly encouraging to know that there are people who understand the issues, who understand our perspective as creators, but we recognise that the complexity and the nuances of how to balance this. But I think if you can, these proposals are not outrageous. They are sensible forward-thinking, innovative ways of making sure that the internet works and delivers the promise that it was supposed to do, which is opportunity and egalitarian, democratic choice for everybody. And at the moment, the benefits of the internet are not living up to their promise at the moment. I think the value of British and European creativity is not ending up in Britain or Europe. It's ending up in the Bay Area of San Francisco.
Well, we've got to change that.
Yeah.
We've got protectionism coming to the fore all over the place.
Yeah.
This is not protectionism. This is just creating a level playing field and making sure that our artists are treated fairly, ultimately. And whilst we've got British MEPs here, I think those of us that are constructively engaged have a duty to make sure that we deliver on this before we arrive at a point where we're no longer here.
I can't tell you how distraught I am about the thought of British MEPs not being here, but thank you so much.
It's good of you to say that.
Sajjad, Karim, thank you
Very good
very
to have
much.
seen you.
That was a really good talk.
Thank you.